It's exciting to return to these mystics. What I love most about them, is this, and why we need them so today. They do not begin with the human. Let me say it again. They do not begin with the human. They begin with the cosmos itself. And Hildegard paints the cosmos. In her last book, the Book of Divine Works, which I translated and reproduce in this book, which also has some of her songs and some of her most prophetic letters, 50 of them. In this book, she paints pictures of the universe, and we'll show you these pictures. And it so underlines the fact that she, like all these other pre-modern mystics, put the universe, and therefore Mother Earth, before they put the human. The narcissism of our species, that's Pope Francis's term today, the anthropocentrism of the modern era, which puts the human first, Descartes, I think, therefore I am. This is not to be seen in the pre-modern consciousness. Pre-modern consciousness puts creation first, and then humans, we find our place in creation, hopefully. And this is what we're suffering from today. This is what Mother Earth is suffering from, this lack of interconnectivity with the rest of creation. This is unusual in the history of humanity. All indigenous peoples recognize the sacredness of creation and how we fit into that. But not the modern era. We banished the sense of the sacred, practically. And we were so thrilled by discovering our capacities for knowledge. And of course, that's not necessarily a bad thing, but humans have always sought knowledge. Hildegard herself says, all science comes from God. All science comes from God. So she was not separating the divine and human knowledge at all. But in her very first book, the title is Shivias, which is two Latin words meaning know, she, the ways, vias, know the ways. And what she means by that is the ways of folly on the one hand and the ways of wisdom on the other. Know the ways. And there's a story behind her book. She was born in the Rhineland, and at a young age, her parents gave her to a hermitess who was connected to the Benedictine abbey, and herself then became an abbess, the head of the women's side of the abbey. This was a Celtic monastery, which meant there were men and women living together in different parts of the monastery. And the women had a woman leader, the abbess, and the men had the abbot, the male leader. Eventually, Hildegard then joined that monastery after having studied with this hermitess for a number of years. She got a very fine education in both instances. But when the abbess died, she was elected abbess. And after a while, in her young 40s, around 40 or 41, she had this mystical experience that really opened her up. And I'll show you her self-portrait that she painted out of that. So that is to be found here, plate number 2. Now it's an amazing painting. Notice what's there. You have the fire, like the fire of Pentecost, when fire came over all the apostles at Pentecost. You have the fire coming right over her head. And so she is identifying with the original apostles, being chosen to be a spokesperson for divinity. And notice what's in her hand. There's a stylus and a clay tablet. So she's beginning to write. And the message was that she should write a book. And that book became Shivias, the first of her books. And it contains not only many thoughts about theology and science, but also it contains the first opera of the West. 300 years older than any other opera. She was a genius at music and other things. And it contains many paintings of her mandalas and her mystical visions, which we'll be sharing as we move along. So notice just that alone. The book was not just words. This is very Celtic, of course, isn't it? Even though she's German, if you will, by roots. But the Celts settled all the way down the Rhine. And the Celts, as you know from the Book of Kells and their wonderful iconography over the centuries, they didn't just write books with letters in them. They had these marvelous paintings, doctored up letters themselves, to include animals, plants and other elements of creation that wove into letters. Letters were not as stark as they are in English and French and German today. They had these pictures weaving in and out. Well, Hildegard was of that tradition. Now there's a man in the picture, that is her secretary, Voma. But this was most interesting. I showed this painting of hers years ago in Santa Fe, and a Native American spoke up and said to me, look carefully at that left-hand pillar, the red pillar. And what you see is a stick figure. What it really is a corn mother. It took a Native American to see this, a corn mother. And there's also one in the other pillar as well, but it's harder to see. But why would Hildegard paint a corn mother? Well, first of all, because the Celts came to America long before Columbus. They didn't make a mess, so we forgot their presence. So these stories were passed on by the Celts to Celtic monks and others. There are these people that honor the corn mother. And of course, the corn mother is not only an image of, or a symbol of food, corn comes up every year, but also of resurrection. It comes up every spring. It seems to die, the stalks die in the end of summer, and they come up again in the spring and bear fruit. So this is a symbol of resurrection, and Hildegard talked about her own conversion, her waking up at 41 years of age and writing her first book. And by the way, her first book was a tremendous success. St. Bernard, who was a hotshot in the monastic world at the time and close to the Pope, he endorsed the book, if you will, told the Pope, and Hildegard became famous, really, when the book came out. And lots of young women came to study with her at this monastery. This amazing woman who's writing an opera and painting and also this serious book, Theology and Science. They went to study with her. Well, there wasn't enough room in the women's wing of the monastery for all these people to study with Hildegard. And instead of moving over, the male monks just kind of put a limit on women who could join Hildegard. And Hildegard did not like this, so she left. She pulled up with her nuns, and they left the monastery. She started her own monastery, not far away, but her own monastery. And we have the correspondence from the abbot saying, come back, and bring the dowries with you, because at that time, to be a nun, you were of the aristocratic class, and you had to pay a dowry. Well, when she upped and left with her nuns, they took their dowries with them. This did not please the male members, but she never returned, and she wrote a letter back to the abbot, and it's all about justice and injustice. So she started this monastery, and it so flourished that she started a second one across the river on the Rhine. Both her first and second monasteries are on the Rhine, near Bingen, not far from Frankfurt. And she took her secretary with her, the monk Voma. So that story tells you, I think, something about the personality of Hildegard. She was not easily pushed around, and she was plenty aware that there's a diversity with how women and men are treated in society, in the church, in the 12th century. This obviously did not slow her down.